You are now listening to the Just Corrections podcast with your host, William Young.
Can we just get this show on the road?
What is the latest on the statewide strike by New York's correctional officers? Well, depending on what article you read or which headline pops up in your feed, the strike is either over, almost over, or still technically happening. It's a fluid situation, and I've been reading everything that I can find to try to piece it all together for you. So today I'm going to give you what I know, which isn't much and probably definitely is not everything that is happening, but I'm going to break down today the 5 things that you need to know right now about the New York prison strike, and I'll tell you what's confirmed, what's still up in the air, and where things may be headed next. Greetings, my fearless frontliners, my fellow guardians of the galleries. I'm William Young, correctional officer turned correctional advocate, and this is my podcast. And if you're new here, welcome. If you're a current, aspiring, retired, or soon-to-be retiring correctional professional and you're looking for content that is informative, it's engaging, and intended to elevate and educate the profession, then you're in the right place. If you're looking for war stories from someone who quit after a couple of weeks, well, this is not going to be that. And before I dive into it, before I get any further into this, I want to thank the members of the Just Corrections Patreon community, the JCP, for supporting this video, supporting the channel. Without you, I could not create the content that I create, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you all. And if you're watching and you want to contribute, support the channel, I'll throw a link in the description below, or if you'd rather just buy super thanks, if you're watching on YouTube, you can do that by hitting the little thanks button below right now. So, all right, here's what I know so far. Number 1, this all started because correctional officers hit their breaking point. So from everything I've read, everything that's out there, this wasn't a spontaneous walkout or a planned distraction to cover up crimes committed by correctional staff, right? This whole thing appears to be a response to a combination of unsafe working conditions, chronic understaffing, mandatory 24-hour shifts, and frustration with the HALT Act, which is New York's anti-solitary confinement law. Unsafe working conditions, chronic understaffing, mandatory overtime, and a dramatic increase in staff assaults, which officers are contributing to the Humane Alternative to Long-Term Solitary Confinement Act, or the HALT Act. And this is a law that limits who can be placed in solitary confinement and how long they can be placed in solitary confinement. I'm going to do a little more research on that, and I'm going to put out a video on that maybe later this week. But the thing to know is that for a while now, correctional officers have been forced to work back-to-back double shifts, pulling 24 hours straight on the clock because there just aren't enough staff to cover the post. And I've even had some officers reach out to me and say that they've worked, upwards of 32, 33, 34 hours straight. Guys, that's crazy. That's dangerous. It's dangerous for them. It's dangerous for the incarcerated, and it's dangerous for the public. So this strike wasn't about a bad day, a bad week, a new policy. It was about years of neglect, frustration, and danger that has been stacking up until officers couldn't take it anymore. And another note, that this crisis, right, the staffing crisis specifically, is not unique to New York. Prisons across the country, jails across the country are dangerously short-staffed, and the people who stick around, the people who show up to serve, are left to carry this weight, this impossible weight of filling every post, covering every shift, and absorbing all of the danger. Look, I said this before in the video that I put out last week about this, and I've said it in other places, and I'll repeat it here. If correctional staff are voicing their concerns with the conditions, with the violence, then we should absolutely listen to them, because what we deal with on a daily basis is not okay. Our normal is not normal. And if they're in a situation now where they're saying, look, enough is enough, then we should listen. And not just for their sake, right? For everyone's sake. And I'm going to be honest, I'm a little partial to the officers. I can sympathize with the officers because I was an officer, right? Because I'm still in the correctional profession. But this is not just about the officers. This is about everyone involved, all the staff members, all the officers, all the incarcerated. The issues that are being raised affect everyone. Number 2, let's talk about this quote unquote deal, this tentative deal that they've reached sort of. So several outlets, including Spectrum News, Times Union, Police One, and I'll put all the links to these in the description if you want to check them out, all reported that a tentative agreement was reached between the correctional officer union, NYSCOPBA, and the governor's office, the governor's administration. And so here's what is in the deal, supposedly in the deal, what they're reporting here. And the first thing is a partial suspension, and I think they've said like 90 days, up to 90 days of the HALT Act. So allowing certain facilities to use disciplinary segregation, solitary, for inmates who assault staff. So let me say that again so you understand why officers have a problem, why officers may be upset. As a part of this deal, the state is considering allowing facilities to use disciplinary segregation for inmates who assault staff. So here's where I'm confused, and I don't even feel like this should be a discussion. I saw a Facebook post the other day. I was scrolling through, and the wife of a correctional officer who was assaulted posted pictures of her husband, posted, about the details of this assault. And what had happened was he was walking on the tiers, and an inmate splashed him, threw boiling hot baby oil on him, face, neck area, burned him. Officers are getting stabbed, gassed, kicked, all of this all the time. And so if you're saying that now we are considering, if an inmate does that, severely assaults staff, that maybe you can put him in disciplinary segregation, that seems kind of weird for me. Here's the other thing, and let's play both sides of this. Inmates aren't just assaulting staff. The inmates that do those kind of things, that are violent like that, are also violent towards other individuals. And so the inmates that are in segregation, or as they're calling it, solitary confinement, are not just in there for assaulting staff. They're in there for all sorts of reasons. The individuals that are in there that have to be set aside from the rest of the population, that have proven themselves to not be able to play nice with others, they need to be in there. Now, I do agree that maybe they shouldn't be in there forever and ever and ever, unless they've proven to others that they cannot play well with others, unless they've repeatedly been given chances. And then at what point do you say, you know what, enough is enough? Do we wait till this person kills somebody? Do we wait till this person severely maims somebody? I mean, what do we do? And so there's a lot that goes into this, and I'm going to do a video on the HALT Act. I'm going to do a video on segregation. I'm going to talk a little bit more into that, but I'm going to tell you, as a correctional officer that has spent a little bit of time in segregation, that has spent some time in a correctional facility, and knows what human beings can do to other human beings, you definitely have to have a place in your department, in your facility, in your agency, in your institution, where you can take those people and you can keep them away from other people, because people aren't safe when they're around. So that's what I'm going to say about that now. I can only imagine what your comments are going to be, but that's okay, because you are not me, and my perception is my perception. The other thing that this tentative deal is talking about is a review of mandatory overtime practices, especially those 24-hour shifts, with the goal, they say, the goal of ending them. I have a problem with this, because, again, who thinks having staff work in an environment like corrections, an environment where every decision has a life or death consequence, should be working for 24 hours straight? And even 16 hours, in my opinion, is too much, because you work a 16-hour shift, you go home for 8, and then you have to come back, but you don't sleep for 8 hours. You have to go home, and you have a half-hour commute, an hour commute. You have to still be a parent. You still have to eat. You still have to do your laundry. You still have to do things. You have to unwind from the craziness so you may be sleeping 2 or 3 hours. You come back and you do it again. It is not enough time, right? But unfortunately, in this situation, and I put it out there, I put the feelers out there and said, where did this even come from? My understanding, what I got back, is that the union leadership signed off on this 24-hour mandatory shift. And I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm trying to figure out more about it, but I'm going to say this. Correctional officers should not work anymore, should not be mandated any more than to a 12-hour shift, unless the walls are falling down, unless the place is on fire. There's obviously circumstances that could say, hey, look, we're going to have you stay a little bit, but understaffing should not be that. We should make sure that officers have the time to rest and recoup and recharge, because they are not okay. People are exhausted. Are you kidding me? You want people running in charge of other people, making life or death decisions that haven't slept for more than a couple of hours? Come on, guys. This should not also even be a discussion. Okay. And then the third thing they're talking about is commitments to hiring more staff, reassessing facility staffing levels, which is something officers have been demanding for years. Look, I know that you can't force people to work in a prison or a jail, but you have to try. You have to get creative, spend the money to advertise, spend the money to up the wage, do whatever you can, do anything, leave no stone unturned. You got to get creative with this, because having mandatory 16-hour shifts, 24-hour shifts, mandating people to stay to work 2, 3, 4. Some people are working 2-3 weeks in a row. Some people can be called in on the day off. If you look at what correctional officers have to do, what the facilities plans are to keep their facility staffed, it is taking the same group of people that always show up for work and forcing them to continue to do that over and over and over and over again until they burn out, they die, or they quit. And that's not good. That should not be plan A. So here it is. And this is the key. This is what I want you to realize about this: a tentative deal. At the time of this recording, my research, which I will continue, the deal isn't finalized yet. It still needs to be formally ratified. And until that happens, everything can still be changed. Everything's subject to change. Remember, this strike was not a union-sanctioned strike. It is being reported by the state as an illegal strike. And any deal that has been struck, and I've read this on a couple of different things, has to be accepted by the individual officer. So this is not something that the union and the mediator can say, okay, good, we're good, everybody goes back to work. This is, from my understanding, something that each individual officer that has stepped out, that is striking, has to say, okay, I agree, I'm coming back to work. Some other things that they talked about for this is they want no disciplinary for the officers that stepped out, no loss of benefits and things like that. But one article I read said that come March 3rd, I think March 2nd, March 3rd. So by the time, I don't know when you're watching this, but people are going to start losing their health benefits. People are going to start facing some serious consequences. And honestly, from the start, and that's my third point here, officers who stepped out, who decided to strike, facing threats of arrest, termination. And what really stood out to me from the coverage, from the things that I've read, especially the coverage in the Times Union, was how the state approached this, right? New York has a law, and it's called the Taylor Law, that bans public employees from striking. And the state, they've been using that to attempt to get officers to report back to work. And at one point, the Supreme Court ordered officers back to work. And they warned them that if they don't, they could face fines, termination, arrest. So you've got this sort of weird standoff, tug of war between officers saying, look, we can't keep working like this. And the state saying, well, you can't just walk off the job either. So it's incredibly messy. And depending on what you read, it's maybe is over or it isn't. And this is where I get a little confused. It gets confusing because some sources say that some officers have returned to work. Others say the walkout ended once the tentative deal was announced. But at the same time, I'm reading reports that not everyone is okay with the deal, happy with the deal, and that there are rumblings that other officers are still calling out, still staying on the line, whether in protest or just because they're burnt out. So is the strike officially over? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on which article you read and which facility you're talking about. And that's why I am saying right now today, the whole thing is still extremely fluid. And it's fluid because if you know anything about emergency preparedness, if you've ever talked about that, they teach us that in an emergency situation, it's not over even when it's over, because there are still going to be things that come out of this. There's still, because if the staff is forced to return to work, if they feel like they're not being heard, but now they're making a choice between feeding their kids and continuing to put up with the conditions that cause them to lay down their equipment and their uniforms and go out and strike, then they're going to feel a certain type of way about that. they're still going to be upset about that, right? That this is my concern, is that nothing is going to change because we're focused on the immediate crisis right now, which is we have a group of people that say enough is enough, and we can't effectively run. I don't want to use that word effectively. We can no longer run our correctional facilities the way that we have been running them, which is kind of barely, right? Which is not maybe the most effective way that we have been running them. So we have an immediate crisis, and we're going to try to stop that crisis. We're going to try to get people to return to work so we can resume our normal daily operations, but that doesn't solve the problem. And so again, I've been reading, from the officer's perspective. I've also been reading from the prison advocate's perspective too, from the incarcerated, saying, hey, look, the conditions in here are bad. The plumbing, the food, the time we get to spend out, these things are bad. There are things in here that need to be addressed, the level of violence, the segregation. So look, there's people on both sides of this discussion, both perspectives coming together and say things have to change. And by forcing the people to go back to work, my fear is that the immediate problem is under control and we can get back to business as usual. And that is, that's not going to be okay. That is going to create problems down the road because it's a Band-Aid for a bullet hole. So remember that this is not just about New York. And that's why I said in the last video, focus on this because this could be the tip of the iceberg. So whether you work in New York or Nebraska or anywhere in between, this is bigger than just the one state. The issues driving this strike, understaffing, forced overtime, lack of support from leadership, and policies that officers feel make the job more dangerous, those aren't just unique to New York. And what happens here, and I just said this, could be a preview of what happens, of what's coming for correctional systems across the country. Because if you push officers to their breaking point, if you ignore their safety, their sanity long enough, then they're going to push back, right? Whether it's illegal or not, because who are correctional officers? They're people. And any person put in a position where they feel like their back is up against the wall, like they feel like they have no voice and they have no other option than to burn shit down, then people usually start to burn shit down, right? We've seen that outside in society. We see that all the time throughout history. If you have a group of people who feel like they're being pushed, who feel like they're not being listened to, they will advocate for themselves. And that's what's happening here. And that's why we can't just ignore this. We can't just push people to go back to work. We can't just repeal the HALT Act or put the HALT Act in more. We have to have an honest conversation sitting down at the same table talking about those things. And that was the beauty of what I did in Washington, D.C. It was sanctioned by One Voice United. We had people who were willing to sit down at a table and have this dialogue, right? And I think the beautiful thing of it was that neither side is going to be 100% comfortable with the conversation. And the outcome, the solution, is not going to be 100% comfortable for everybody. We're going to all have to move in the same direction to come up with a solution that addresses everybody's safety, that addresses everybody's sanity. Because if you have a facility that's understaffed, if you have officers that are burnt out, that are angry, that feel disenfranchised, then they're not going to be doing their job effectively. They're not going to be doing their job in a way that upholds the mission statement, the idea behind corrections in general, right? And so you can have all the programming in the world, you can have all the classes in the world, but if your staff that are tasked with facilitating those things are not okay, then it's not going to work. The same is true for the other population that is in our prison system, which is the incarcerated. If they don't have the things that they feel that they need, right? Hot water, food, if they don't feel safe, then they're going to act out as well. So you have to come up with solutions that everybody can live with. And that takes a real uncomfortable conversation. So let's recap. The New York strike, the New York Correctional Officer strike, the great New York Correctional Officer strike of 2025 was really years in the making, right? Right now, there's a tentative deal, but it's not final yet. Officers are facing termination, arrest, but even in the face of that, some are standing their ground. So whether the strike is over, almost over, or still happening, quietly happening, maybe not so quietly happening, depends on who you ask, what you read, and most importantly, and this is what I want you to remember, this is not just New York's problem. This is a warning for every correctional system in the country. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with me today. I'm going to do some follow-up shows on this. Maybe, I don't know, this isn't really my thing. My thing is wellness, but I want you to understand that all roads for me lead to wellness, and the perspective that I'm trying to give you, the insight that I'm going to try to put out there is that whatever is happening, right? There's three sides to every story. My side, your side, and the truth. But whatever is happening, this needs to start, this needs to create a conversation, a dialogue, so people feel heard. You have a disenfranchised population, correctional staff, that feel underappreciated, disrespected, and now they're trying to do something about it. And here's the deal. Will there be things in the future, policies, procedures, legislations that are going to anger them, that cause a similar reaction? Maybe. So include them in the process. Talk to the people that have to implement the plans that you want to put in place to see if that's even a thing that they can do. By bringing people in on the discussion, you will find that they'll be more receptive to the things that you're trying to do if they feel like they were a part of that plan, if they feel like they're being listened to and being taken seriously, even if you don't choose to implement the things that they say you should implement. We're not very good at that in correction. So again, thank you guys for watching this. I went a little long again today, watching the podcast. New episodes available every day, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Set a reminder on your phone or your calendar so you never miss an episode. Subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever it is. I don't know where all the place it is. Follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. Leave a comment. Guys, leave a comment. Get involved. And I have been reading your comments on my other videos, and I try to respond to all of them. And I do appreciate the comments. I do appreciate the discourse, and I do appreciate those of you who are keeping it respectful, who are voicing your opinion, who are dropping your comments, but are keeping it respectful. I'd really like this to be a place where we can bounce ideas off of each other, where we can understand that it's going to take all of us moving in the same direction to fix the things that are not right now in our profession. So keep them coming. Get involved, engage, share the show, share the videos with your friends, family, fellow correctional professionals, everybody, the Just Corrections podcast. And if you're interested in supporting the show, then please consider becoming a member of the Just Corrections Patreon community. There are a couple of different tiers, different options. Check that out. I'll put a link in the description below. Don't forget to check out the books. Train to Change, The Nothing That Never Happened. All of that will be available in the description as well. And if you'd like to bring me out to speak or present at your event, send me an email at justcorrections.booking@gmail.com. All right, guys, that's all I got. Until next time, be smart, stay safe, stay sane, and we'll talk soon.